There is a secret killer inside every single orchid that you buy from the store that will mean it won't last more than a couple of months in your home. It's the exact same thing that happened to this orchid that I bought a few weeks ago that I've since corrected, and now it's much happier. So we're going to go to the store and buy a couple of orchids, bring them back. I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So, these are the two orchids that I've just bought from Homebase, my local hardware store here in Sheffield, with some open flowers and some buds that are just starting to open. That's exactly what you want to see when you buy an orchid from the store. You want to see some unopened buds. It just means it's going to last a bit longer. Orchids, in general, aren't really looked after in the best way in the store. The first one you'll notice, they always come in these plastic wrappers. And the reason for that is an orchid leaf wants to kind of fan out in that fashion, and the wrapper's keeping it that way, so they can obviously store lots of them. They probably don't tend to water them in the best way either, because these stores tend to blanket water all the plants at the same time. That's what I've noticed whenever I go into a store. Lots of their houseplants have sopping wet soil, at least in my area anyway. So these orchids probably get watered at the same time as all the other houseplants, which is probably too often because they don't like to have wet roots particularly, or sopping wet roots anyway. But the hidden problem that we have is in the root, in the root ball. It's always the same whenever you buy these plants. So the first thing to do is to get this plastic wrapper off without taking off the flowers. There you go, that's one. There we go. So straight away you can see, not too bad on that one actually. The leaves, they want to fan out, and the saran wrap is keeping it upright. Normally what you tend to see is a little bit of damage on the leaves when they've been living too long in that way. They tend to be a little bit creased, but it's not the end of the world really. So the problem in the soil or in the bark. So the first thing to say, so we need to get this out of the pot basically. And the first thing to say is that the good thing about this is that they are growing in bark, which is exactly what you want to see with an orchid. You don't want to see them in soil because they're epiphytes, they grow on the bark of trees. So if they're in soil, that's just going to kill them basically. So the roots want to be in a nice chunky bark mixture in the pot. And there we have it. There is the problem. A plug in the middle of the plant where the roots are kind of growing into it. So this is otherwise known as a death plug in the trade, because when these get left in plants, they tend to kill them eventually. Oops, I want to topple that over, come on. So there's a death plug on that one. And then just to prove the point, we'll show it on this one as well. Yep. There is a plug in the middle, just underneath the crown of the plants. So what are these and why are they here? So these are basically little plugs that help kind of anchor the plants in the pot, I think. And it also helps with transportation as well, because these hold on to moisture much better than bark. So when they're transporting plants around their shops, they kind of hold on to moisture. In theory, keeps the plant nice and healthy while they're selling it. But the problem for us is that if we don't get it out of the plant, it tends to kind of suffocate the roots a little bit, and it holds on to too much moisture, and that's not really good for the health of the orchid. So what I always like to do is get these out, and they are a bit of a pain to get out because sometimes the roots will grow into it, like that one is there, are starting to grow into the plug. So I think they're made out of foam. So what I like to do, it does come off quite easily. Is that made out of foam? That might be made out of some sort of peat or something. Either way, it's not ideal for the plant. So I'm just getting in there with my fingers and trying to pick it out, which is a bit tricky sometimes, without breaking the roots. So they are useful for anchoring the plant in the pot, but that's only really useful when the plant is young and when it's being transported around. As you'll see when I repot this, it's quite easy to get them into their pot successfully without them flopping over. So there's a little nugget in there that I'm just trying to get out. There we go. And while you're at it, what I like to do is just go and just check the health of the roots. So these roots here are perfectly healthy. It's exactly what you want to see with an orchid. Kind of on the green, greyish side, nice and plump, nice and firm. But there will be some dead roots like that one there. So you just want to cut those off. Doesn't harm the plant in any way. There's an old leaf as well there that can go. Another dead end there. Another old leaf. Overall though, this one is a nice healthy orchid. Good healthy roots, exactly what you want to see. So I'm gonna pop that to the side there. So these roots are a little bit more dry, like they've been suffering. Maybe they've held on to this plant, it's not sold, and they've held on to it for a while. So I'm gonna try, if I can, get this out. That came out a lot easier. So there you have it. I think that must be made out of some sort of peat moss or something. Sometimes it's foam, which obviously doesn't biodegrade, so you do have to get that out if it is foam. It's not ideal to have that in your plants. So in this case, it looks like they're using something that does biodegrade, but you want to get it out nonetheless anyway, I think. Okay, and just like before, there's some straggly roots that are kind of dying on the ends. So if they're looking dry and really grey and mushy, then you want to get those out. So the bark that I tipped out, there's no problems with reusing that whatsoever. So I just bought it from the store, so it's going to be perfectly fine. So I'm just reusing the same pot as well. So we just want to repot it basically. And it's fairly easy with an orchid. Just get it basically where it lived before. Grab your bark and try and fill the gaps with the bark. So like I say, you don't want to use anything like soil because that would be too dense for the roots and it will suffocate. Orchid roots want air above everything else, so that's what bark is for, because obviously live on the trees, the bark of trees in their natural habitat. Yeah, I like to give it a pat and a bit of a bounce just to get the bark at the bottom of the pot. And it's just a case of filling it in to the same level it was. You don't want to bury it deeper into the pot than it already was, really, because that will kind of compromise the crown of the plant. As you can see, it's well anchored in there, so you can get rid of the plug, no problems, and it will be fine. So this one's got lots of roots. Hopefully it's going to fit back in this pot. In fact, to get it to fit back in the pot, I might just give it a bit of a root prune. Put that more or less where it was, like so. Try not to destroy the flowers. I seem to have run out of bark, so I will have to open up my bag of Cybertanica bark. But I'll use what I've got here first. And there we have my 2 repotted plants. So these will be much healthier now that I've removed these death plugs from the root ball. So there's no longer going to hold on to excess moisture, and it's going to be able to breathe as it wants in these pots. So eventually the blooms on this orchid will fade. This one quicker than this one because this one's still got unopened blooms. So they will fade and fall off, and I will be left with a couple of spikes, flower spikes, without any flowers on. But you don't want to chuck them in the bin because there is life in the old dog yet. If you follow this link here, I'll go through the process of getting your orchids to reflower after they finish blooming. So check it out and I'll see you there.